I can underline maybe one lesson, which is
Mhm.
above all others, there is no perfect emergency medical system, nowhere in the world.
Today we're joined by Khikmat Anvarov from Uzbekistan, a physician and healthcare leader whose career has tracked the country's emergency medical system since its post-Soviet beginnings. We cover how Uzbekistan built a national three-tier emergency network from scratch, what COVID taught the system about flexibility and telemedicine, the shift from a Soviet doctor-led ambulance model towards paramedicine, and how the country now shares those lessons with its neighbours across the region. Matt, thank you very much for joining our podcast from Uzbekistan and sharing your knowledge of EMS development in your country. I'm particularly interested in how it developed from the Soviet period from 1991. Can you describe what EMS was prior to that and what sort of system you had and the service you provided?
Okay, thank you very much for having me, Dr. Hamish. My generation is kind of bridge between there and now. So the emergency medicine of Uzbekistan began almost in the same time that modern emergency medicine was developing in Uzbekistan. So I entered medical university and graduated from it from 1998 to 2005 and complete my master degree in emergency between 2005 and 2008. My professional life actually grew together with Uzbek's emergency medicine system. Um, and I belong to the quite unique generation from these early 80s. We were trained after independence in the early 90s, but my teachers' professional roots were in the Soviet healthcare system. In many ways, we became a bridge between two eras of medicine, between there and now, as I said. And what attracted me to emergency medicine was the combination of the clinical complicity and immediate impact, immediate act, what we have to do. In emergency care, decisions made within minutes, they can change the entire course of the patient's life. And I found that both of these challenging me and inspiring at the same time. Over time, my career expanded beyond clinical practice into healthcare management and, research and international cooperation. But emergency medicine has always remained at the center of the everything what I do.
So, can you describe what the initial changes were in those post Soviet times, from 1991 until perhaps more recently? What have you seen improve for emergency medicine and in particular for pre-hospital care or emergency medical services?
There are two ways of development. There is a evolution and revolution. I think in Uzbekistan, you might see both of them, the elements, both of them, even the evolution and the revolution too. The evolution itself was remarkable. So when Uzbekistan became independent in 1991, the country inherited in a healthcare system that had many strengths from the Soviet Union era, but was designed for different political and economical realities. And during the 90s, it became increasingly clear that emergency medicine should have its own organizational model. And the major milestone came in 1998 with the establishment of the Republican Research Center of the Emergency Medicine. That much more than a creation of hospital. It was the beginning of the nationwide emergency care network that eventually connected ambulance services, regional centers, district facilities, air medical transport, and a specialist hospital into one entire whole coordinated system. Looking back, one of the most important achievements was the decision to think national rather than institutionally. We did not build the individual emergency departments, but we built a national emergency care system.
What was the driving force for a national approach?
In my country, of course, you cannot mirror the situation in any particular country to the another one because all these circumstances, and we have to build and design our own system. So the benefits for us was to have this unique and whole system. Because, of course, in emergency, you have no time to think. You have to act first, and that was the very initial steps by protocol, by standards. We should be trained to be automatic. So that's why the semi-military, no discussion, just obey and do. It's kind of, yes, it's kind of. It's not a military, of course. That system, the unique and with a vertical management, strong vertical management, fits for our challenges and fit for our demand that time. Talking about myself in this development, in the very beginning of that, I was the young physician. In 1998, I just entered the medical university. Then, after the graduation, I became the young physician, then an educator and a researcher. Later, I became an administrator and healthcare leader. And early in my career, I became the deputy director in this Republican Research Center of Emergency Medicine. And I can see maybe the both clinical and administrative sides of the coin.
What clinical benefits were there for the change that you made from 1998 until now? What do you see as the things that you did right?
So clinically, implementation of the standards, the worldwide standards, of course, adopted with the local circumstances. I think this decision was the crucial, that the common sense and common used standards and protocols, they are fully integrated here. That gave us the huge field to be connected with other countries, to share the knowledges, to share the skills. And of course, everything what we are doing, that's for benefit of our patient.
And talking about your patients and the population of Uzbekistan, what are their expectations of EMS? And do you think you meet those expectations in the changes that you've made, and why?
Uzbekistan is very young and growing population. So, for example, in the very beginning of the era of the modern emergency, for example, in 2000, we had 25 million population. Now we crossed 39. So it's 160%
Oh.
plus growing. And we are expecting with the same velocity of the multiplication, we are expecting to grow maybe until 2070. And we're expecting to reach 50 million people in 2040. Of course, the emergency medicine should catch this demand too. In very beginning, we built a system just to react. Now our demand and our challenges is to build a system which can prognose, which can predict and do something and act in advance.
So you're taking a much more proactive approach
Yeah,
to
we
delivery of
should.
service.
We have to. We have to.
Could you give us some examples of that? You know, in what way you are being proactive?
The COVID pandemics taught us a lot. Of course, it was a huge test for whole entire system of the healthcare, not only for emergency, but emergency care, emergency system is, I would say, sensitive for that. So the COVID was also a disaster for us and for all of us. And this pandemic showed us what we can do, where there is a gap to be filled, and we tried to adapt our national system for this demand. And looking for the other countries, that I had an opportunity to travel and to learn and study in many other countries, and I can underline maybe one lesson, which is above all others: there is no perfect emergency medical system, nowhere in the world. You cannot just take and mirror someone's very good example in your own country, because it doesn't work, most probably. Every country, because, faces similar challenges: geographical, workspace shortages, funding limitations, of course, aging population, or vice versa, increasing population, increasing demands. The solution differ because the context is differ. For example, in United States, I saw extraordinary specialization and innovation. In Europe, in France, in Austria, in Finland, I was impressed by integrated regional network. In South Korea, for example, I saw how quickly technology can transform healthcare delivery. In our neighbor countries, I observed how healthcare system within the similar historical roots we have evolved in different direction. Those experiences reinforced an important principles. Again, the successful healthcare reform is never about copying another country. We have always design and adopt our own thing. It's about adapting the good ideas for local realities. Coming back to the COVID pandemics, I can say it's greatest stress test for our healthcare system, what we have experienced it, and it showed us a lot. Before the pandemic, many healthcare systems, including ours, tended to measure preparedness through the infrastructure. Now we realize that even the countries with very good infrastructure, with a high-end technician, they need a good solution, the good organizational solution, because they can fall. The resilience of the system is one that can rapidly reorganize itself under the pressure. So that's why during the pandemics, I think we learned the importance of the flexibility, communication, the workforce, adaptability, and real-time decision maker. Now, 5 years after the pandemics, I often said that pandemic compressed 10 years of organizational learning into 2 years.
What do you think then are a couple of the lessons that you have learned that you could tell another organization, EMS elsewhere in the world, we learnt this from that pandemic?
Okay, let's start with the good things. Yeah. We
Yes,
survived.
start with the good
This is,
things.
yeah,
And
yeah, yeah. We,
we'll
we
work our
have
way back.
survived. That is a good thing. Yeah.
Yes.
Anyway, everything what didn't kill me, doing me better. Yeah. One of the benefits which pandemics left us is the telemedicine, I think. Telemedicine has boosted during the pandemics and even afterwards. Before COVID, telemedicine was often discussed as a just interesting future technology, just for fun. After COVID, it became our operational necessity, is our routine now. We suddenly needed ways for specialists in major centers to support physicians working hundreds of kilometers away in some remote areas. Remote consultations, virtual cases, conferences, and digital clinical support became part of our everyday practice. For countries with a large territory and especially geographic varieties with a dispersed population, telemedicine is especially valuable. Sometimes I summarize this way, that sometimes expertise might travel faster than the patient. I think this idea, it's quite simple idea, but it captures the essence of the telemedicine in emergency care. The second thing is the resilience of the system. We have to be flexible. The system should be flexible for any kind. Of course, there is no universal system. There is no perfect system for emergency. But we learn. We study and we learn. We're trying to adopt all benefits which from even the bad things.
Can you also, I guess, reflect on the challenges from changing from the Soviet model to the model you now have? So we know the Soviet model was a doctor, a nurse, and a driver and an ambulance. What has changed to your system that's currently operating across your country?
But in
Yep.
Uzbekistan, emergency is the entire system. We have hospitals devoted only for emergency. Eastern countries with the plenty of the multidisciplinary centers, medical centers, with the emergency department in each of that. We have a special dedicated hospitals, system of hospitals. And before 2021, even the ambulance, the pre-hospital system also belonged to that entire system, but we have split it. So the most significant reform, I think, in the transition is a transition to this 3-level emergency care model. It's like a pyramid. We are on the top as a tertiary level hospital. Also, we have in Uzbekistan 13 provinces, so we have 13 branches. In the district level, they have only qualified emergency medical aid, not specialized. So, for example, you know that two leading groups of diseases are the cardiovascular diseases and traumas. The same in Uzbekistan. Maybe for aging countries, not trauma, maybe oncology, but nevertheless, they always compete trauma and oncology for second and third place. But cardiovascular, they are leaders. And you know the golden hour principle. So from remote areas, for example, the time to bring the patient to the proper hospital, not to the nearest one, but to the proper hospital, where is a CT 24/7, where is a good educated and trained staff, where is a angio machine, where is all these things we need to provide the contemporary aid to person with some acute cardiovascular disease or acute trauma. Before 2018, it was challenging. It was a real problem because from remote area, 3 hours to bring the patient, all this equipment we had only in the regional centers. In another hand, if you put in each another of 200 districts and remote areas, what we have in my country, the CT scan angio machine, it wouldn't be so effective because they will see maybe 1 or 2 patients a day. I mean, urgent patient. So that's why the decision was to create in my country inter-district hospitals, which are uniting 3-4 neighbor districts, covering roughly about 1 million population. And that hospitals we equipped with all this machinery, and now we are capable to catch this golden hour. Now we have this 3 level. Now we can provide the specialized contemporary emergency medical aid to the patient in the remote areas, in districts. Now we can catch this golden hour. After this, developing the interdistrict centers for major trauma and acute cardiovascular emergencies. Now we are strengthening the STEMI networks. Now we are putting our efforts for this cardiovascular, improving the trauma pathways, redesigning the patient's routing system, especially for this STEMI patient, for the stroke patient. And I could say that the central question is changing now. What before, for example, what we have in 2000, how do we transfer patient to the specialized care? Now the question is, how do we bring specialized care closer to the patient? I think this is a principally different approach. And that paradigm shift in thinking is shaping now many of our current reforms.
So you're really bringing technology and all those high level interventions closer to the patient
Yep.
rather than trying to bring the patient closer to those interventions. I'm reading it correctly, or
Yes. Yes.
yeah. So in that system, where does the ambulance fit? Is it a national service, and how does it
Yes.
fit into that system? So
Ambulance is still part of us. I mean, mentally, ambulance is still part of us. I think we are two shoulders of one body because in the end of the day, our main aim is the same patient. We're doing the same approach and we can help patient more. And yes, ambulance is the same centralized, verticalized managing system with a center here in Tashkent and branches in the provinces, in regions, the same pyramidal shape, and we are working together, not against each other, but together. That's a difference. What, for example, I used to see in many other countries when the ambulance and pre-hospital and hospital system, they always fight, they always compete. Is this patient urgent or not? I think we have passed this test. now we are working together.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Khikmat. What is the
Mm.
secret of bringing them together? I mean, how did you achieve that?
In the very initial step, that is personalities. The team, which is looking to the one side, the same side, which are working on the same wave and thinking on the same wave. This is interpersonal skills. That is the role of the personalities, I think, always. Because you can have a system with good ideas, but the performance is not fit for this idea. I think you have to find the team understanding the idea and doing the same approach.
So it really came down to the people driving it um, with the right attitude made it work.
Yep. Mm, the time is matter in emergency always, and I think time is our enemy and is our friend. And if you want to unite people, I think you have to have the common enemy and you have to have the common friend. I mean, the pre-hospital and hospital will both have to catch the time always. That one of the biggest lessons from starting international system is that successful emergency medicine is organized around time critical conditions. It's absolutely equal about the trauma. It's equal about stroke, heart attack, sepsis. Of course, details they can vary from country to country, but the principle is universal. That's why I think this what uniting us, the time. The time matters because the patient they need right intervention at the right place at the right time, and ambulance has to bring this patient to the right place within the right time, and we have to do the rest. Uh, Everything else is built around this objective.
With these remarkable changes and developments that you're discussing, what has been the government support around this? How did you convince government ministers to spend money on developing the system that you're describing?
We are fully governmental because by law in Uzbekistan, all human beings can get emergency medical aid, full range of emergency free of charge. Doesn't matter for citizen of Uzbekistan or guests, tourists, whatever. Uh, all human beings, they are free of charge, get the full range of emergency medical aid. It's by law. And that's why the government is responsible for that. Of course, when you're talking about the budgeting organization, about the finance, there is always it's a huge headache, and all countries they have their own approach for the financing. Government play a leading role here. If they have this understanding, I mean, the government had this understanding that without resilient emergency, there is no resilient entire healthcare. That I think that a key point.
So really, with the approach of emergency management, emergency health management, and in Uzbekistan has been to say to government, you really need a resilient emergency health system as part of a very resilient overall health system.
Yeah,
If one part is not, then they all fall down.
for sure. Yes, it's like a card house.
And so, do you think that's then swayed government officials and ministers to say, okay, we will fund this support for improved emergency health services across the country?
They have to. They have to because there is a main. It's a main system where the people can freely come and get quite decent emergency aid,
If I was a
especially when they need it.
yes, if I was a country that came to you and said, we want to reform our health system, our post-Soviet health system, what advice would you give them generally about how to go about it? What sort of things do you think they need to think about if
Yeah,
countries and even
maybe
in
some. I would say this: that do not start with technologies. Again, of course, our the difference between the contemporary medicine and the medicine what we had used to have, for example, 100 years ago, these are technologies. But Please do not start with them only. Technology is very important, but organization saves more lives. And create clear pathways for the patient, train people, establish governance structure, build a reliable communication system, measure outcomes, and only then begin adding increasingly sophisticated technologies. I think that our national experience demonstrates that meaningful progress is possible even in resource constrained environments when there is a long-term commitment and a clear strategic vision.
You mentioned training and those sorts of, I guess you might call them soft activities when you've got funding for ambulances and things. I've noticed in our research that some countries have actually just gone ahead and said, "Well, we're going to buy a fleet of new ambulances, and that'll fix the problem." But they don't think about training, and they don't think about all those other things that you've mentioned. How did Uzbekistan avoid that pitfall? Avoid just buying equipment and saying that's going to fix the problem.
I think that was the result of understanding from the very beginning, well, key decision makers from the 90s even, that the technologies without good trained staff is nothing. You may have a very super contemporary, high tech, high end uh, machine, but if you have no staff who can do the proper things on that machine, it will be just a very expensive play toy, nothing else.
And you've recognized that from the beginning.
Yeah,
Uh,
for sure, because the trained stuff without equipment is better than good equipment without trained stuff.
and also we notice in other countries that they've spent money on EMS and on pre-hospital care. The patient is getting good quality treatment, but when they arrive at the emergency door, because the emergency department or the hospital has not received the same funding, the level of quality care goes down dramatically. How have you overcome that situation? And I guess it's by creating that complete flow through from, on the side of the road right through to someone in hospital.
Sometimes we have the same. I cannot say that we solve this problem. No, of course it's about money, it's about financing, and that is an endless battle, I would say. And we still, for example, talking about the financing, we are still on our way for changes. We're still on our way for reforms, and I cannot say that we have passed this.
What mistakes, if you're happy to talk about those, what mistakes or what things didn't really work out the way you had hoped?
I think it's about the financing. What was good, for example, in 2000 and early 2010, now maybe is not so appropriate. We are growing population, young population, and the budget sometimes is unbearable. And of course, the quality can suffer. The drug suppletion can suffer in emergency. And now we are seeing the brain drain to the private hospitals. Of course, the public sector never can compete with the private sector. Now we're trying to keep them, trying to expand the educational stuff, focus on the academical things to anchor the staff. So, but nevertheless, the brain drain is huge. We have to think how to do again, how to change the financing system for the public emergency to a self-justifying and compatible system.
That's a very good point because we've noticed a number of post-Soviet countries that the ambulance or the EMS has had to uh, start introducing paramedics into their system because they could not retain doctors on ambulances. It was too costly. And they were competing with doctors going into private practice or going to other countries. So for a country like Mongolia that's totally reliant on doctors and ambulances, that could be a problem for them in the future.
Yeah, you know, this approach, I mean, to have doctor on board or not to have, you know this classical two polarities in 90s what we have. It's American style of an ambulance, yes, it can run, and European or French German system of ambulance stay and play with physician on board here and paramedics here. They've never combined. But that's what we used to have in 90s. You know that time changes, and now there is no pure American, pure European style. They now trying to mix, and it's not about uh, financing only. There is about the common sense. In some areas, for example, in mostly urban areas, yes, you have to have paramedic on board. It's easier because their task is to bring the patient. But for example, in remote areas, maybe it's making sense to have a physician on board if you have it. Maybe sometimes the physician can do much more than paramedic on site.
Is that what's evolving in Uzbekistan? That the previous Soviet model is now sort of melding into the sort of paramedic slash
Combining, yes,
combined.
combining. Yeah, of course, the financing is also playing its own role in this. Talking about the ambulance, for example, in my country, we have two types of ambulance. There is an ordinary ambulance for the standard cases and the advanced ambulance for some complicated cases, or when we have a patient with a coma, with a heart attack, with a STEMI. For example, for the standard team for ambulance, I think, yes, it's possible to have fully paramedical team or maybe combined. Uh, in advanced medical team, in advanced ambulance, we have to have physician on board still.
Well, what is the public expectation if you've got paramedics on your ambulance in the capital or main cities in Uzbekistan?
Mhm.
Does the public accept that now, or do they still expect a doctor to be coming to their front door and providing care?
Okay, let's start with when you're calling to the ambulance and the ambulance team enter your door, you never ask, are you a physician, are you a nurse? You will accept them, whatever. And of course, the public thinks when you have some problem, you think that your problem is the biggest problem, doesn't matter for the others. And of course, you want to have the best the system can give you. And the mentality of the public, yes, they expect the physician which will bring everything with him. But the principle is keep it safe and simple. The expectation, yes, the public expect the physician more. But this is our job to explain to the public when it's easier and even giving more benefit for the patient to have just only nurses on board and paramedics. When I say the nurses means paramedic. And that's again about the legislation because the prescription for the drugs can be given only by physician for the many drugs. For the many medicine, of course, for narcotics, for narcotic analgesia, that's prescription by our law. It should be given only by physician. And if you want to change this European system with a physician on board to the full American system, you have to change these capabilities to who can prescribe the medicines.
That's certainly happening in Australia and elsewhere, where paramedics will be able to prescribe medications in the next little while.
For
That
sure. But in another hand, it demands of the expanding the training duration for that paramedics because it's impossible to, for example, for 2 months or 6 months to give this understanding when and where you have to do the proper way.
so it's obviously going to impact on training.
Yeah.
I just want to finish off, Khikmat, with this fascinating discussion, but I also want to touch on your role in developing your regional EMS framework with your other neighbour countries and with Turkey. Could you just explain a little bit about what that involves and what you're trying to achieve?
Being united with our neighbors, this is a common sense. That is in our culture. This is our culture code. For example, for us, for Uzbeks, to be in good behavior, to be in good connection with the neighbors. In our culture, we have to keep our neighbor closer than our relative even. So
Mhm. So in that case, you're sharing information and, I guess sharing training and, all those sort of things. Is that's sort of part of the objective?
yeah, it is.
Is it successful?
It depends on. We have to find always the people who are thinking on the same way, who are looking at the same side, as I said you. And I think still the meaning of the interpersonal skills, the meaning of the personalities itself, it's still very valuable.
Khikmat, thank you very much for joining our podcast. It's been a fascinating discussion. I think too,
It was my
it's
pleasure.
it is great to have Uzbekistan bring the valuable lessons that you've learned to everybody's knowledge. So, thank you very much for joining our podcast.
My pleasure.